This podcast contains strong language. Hello everybody, it's me, your favorite banana black bag Ryan, and I was thinking, as I often do, about old video games. So, the past two episodes that I did, they were more focused on life lessons. You know, you have the episode on pending success and failure, and the one before that was just about general tips and tricks and the sort of the way content creators. Well, I guess this episode's sort of going to be like that because it's talking about how things used to be different. But this one's far more self-indulgent. This one's about old video games. Specifically the era of video games that I grew up with. So the original Xbox, PS2, Dreamcast, and then like kind of tipping into the PS3, Xbox 360 era as well. So as you well know, I run a YouTube gaming channel with my friend, and we play a lot of games, a big variety of games. We don't tend to stick with one game as of right now. That will change in the future, but we'll get onto that in the future. And the first game I played was a game called Drake the 99 Dragons, and it is one of the worst games I have ever played in my life. Don't get me wrong. It is atrocious. I've played it once beforehand on stream many a year ago. It was atrocious then, it's atrocious now. It is recognized as one of the worst games ever made. But something about that game just ticked a box for me. That I wanted to actually play it. I wanted to invest my time into it. There's a certain arcadey feel to old games. Like there were aspects of them that are just like, this feels very video gamey, like in Drake the 99 Dragons. You have the whole concept of collecting souls, and when you collect enough souls, you gain a new ability, and regardless of if that ability is good or bad, and regardless of if the levels are good or bad, it just has this very arcadey, video gamey, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen next kind of feel to it that I really miss. And another game that I played very recently, in fact, it's the video that's going to come out the day before this episode, was Sonic Adventure 2, which I've never played, ever. I knew about it, I've seen people stream it, and obviously it served as the basis of inspiration for the latest Sonic movie, Into Shadow. So I thought, right, when's a better time going to be to play this game than right now? When it's very relevant, when it's on my mind, because I've just seen the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which was awesome, by the way. That felt very old school. It had like a 2000s movie kind of vibe for a lot of it, which I loved. So yeah, Sonic Adventure 2. There is something about how old Sonic games are made. I don't mean like original Sonic, because original Sonic games are probably like the best of the side-scrolling genre that was ever on offer. I've played Sonic 1, I've played Sonic 2, I own them both on my Master System, Mega Drive, whatever the fuck it's called in the UK. And I played them both quite a bit. They are awesome, awesome games. They are really, really good examples of that 90s side-scrolling video game era. 3D Sonic games from the 2000s and I guess like the late 90s, they don't feel like they were made by Sega. They don't feel like they were made by a big studio representing a big IP. They feel so weird. Because this is a time where games are at least starting to try and make themselves feel a little more, I don't know, I don't want to say realistic, but like at this point you have games like Mario Sunshine, the first Halo was out, Grand Theft Auto was doing its approach to 3D. Games felt like they were a bit more tangible. The worlds that they were in were a little bit more believable. Obviously you had games like VidRibbon, and Katamari Damacy, like that are ludicrous, but with Sonic being the main kind of rival to Mario, and Mario taking this much more grounded approach. Not again, I don't want to use the word grounded because there's not much grounded about Mario, but you could see yourself walking around the environments of Mario Sunshine, and even to an extent Mario Galaxy. Like it's a bit more gimmicky with the planets and stuff, and it's a bit more video gamey, but it still feels kind of in line with what you would expect. But Sonic games really feel like they plucked the Sonic characters out of the original games and stuck them in this LSD-fueled acid trip. They're so weird, and I love them for that, because everything about it screams video game. Like, if you were to show someone, if someone was to describe in the early 2000s what they thought a video game was, and they weren't actually into video games, they would probably pretty much point at Sonic the Hedgehog and be like, yeah, Sonic Adventure 2, that's what I think a video game is like. A blue hedgehog running around a freeway in the sky at night in the city that makes no sense, riding missiles and blowing up robots. That is what a video game is. It's just so bizarre. And the plot is so slapdash all over the place. I mean, I made the mistake of probably playing the Dark campaign first, which I think you're supposed to play after the Hero one. But my God, it like the story there is so hard to grasp, and yet I was fully fucking enthralled in whatever the fuck was going on with that game. So I miss that, because you play a game now and they've got so much concern with being almost like movie-like, and everything's grounded and there has to be perfect continuity, and graphics are getting more hyper-real all the time, and it's cool. There are games that I really like that do that. I think Call of Duty is a perfectly valid example of the latest Call of Duty campaign. I actually think one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite Call of Duty campaigns, absolutely. I think it's my top 3, but I think it's up there. It's in maybe top 20 FPS campaigns that I've ever played. Pretty solid. And I can excuse it for games like that. But then Halo Infinite, I've enjoyed Halo Infinite. I've enjoyed my time with it. I enjoyed the campaign a fair bit. I think it did a lot of things really well. But it's just lost some of that feel that the earlier bunch of games had. And I know it was praised for actually feeling like a return to form, and I get that in a lot of ways. It's a little more colorful. The art style is more reminiscent of like Halo 2, Halo 3. The enemies do more wacky shit, like the brutes are throwing grunts at people and stuff. But there's just a certain pulpiness is probably the wrong word, but the early Halo games felt almost like science fantasy. Militarized science fantasy is probably how I would describe it. At least Halo 1, Halo 3, Halo 2, I think did go for a bit more of a grounded approach, at least in its first half. I know the SC, that was pretty grounded, and I do love it for that, because it was a change of pace. And Halo Reach was more grounded, and I love that, because it was a change of pace, because you weren't playing as the hero of heroes, you were playing as basically a paratrooper and a squad of special forces, respectively. Halo, when you're playing as the Master Chief, though, should be a power trip, and it should feel a bit more fantastical and larger than life. And Halo Infinite just didn't quite have that for me. I don't know what it was, whether it was like you really just restricted to kind of one biome, and there wasn't much wow factor with the enemies, like compared to, say, fighting the Covenant and then going to fight the Flood. And I don't know. There's just something about newer games, they don't quite grip me as much, because I almost feel like I know exactly how it's going to play out before I get into it. And they don't do the video gamey, arcadey, gimmicky stuff anymore. I mean, like, you had the grapple shot in Halo Infinite. That felt quite gimmicky, but also they did ground it. They did ground it way too much, I think, in sort of limitations. It was really fun to use, but I feel like they could have done way more wacky shit with it that would have been maybe what they would have done in the earlier Halos. I mean, there was a mod for Halo 1 in the lead up to Halo Infinite with the grapple shot, and somehow that felt more fun than the grapple shot in Halo Infinite. The grapple shot in Halo Infinite feels more refined and more gameplay balanced and everything, but the one in the Halo 1 mod feels really fun to use comparatively. Maybe I just prefer Halo 1, but I mean, that's kind of the point, is that I do, because it's a product of its time, and somehow that just clicks better with me. I will say, there are some games coming out that still do appeal to me at this level. This want and need. I think the biggest example of this as a genre is racing games, especially Need for Speed. Need for Speed has a very arcadey feel to it. Forza Horizon's pretty solid for it. I don't play Forza Motorsport as such, because I like I like having a free roam map in my racing game. And Forza Horizon does that quite well. Need for Speed, I think, does it fantastically. I've not played the newest one. I think it's called Heat. I've heard mixed things about it, but then again, I hear mixed things about most Need for Speed games, and yet I do have fun with them. They are pure fucking fun. Another big one is Doom. The Doom reboots, Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. Really, really fun games that just prioritize that rule of cool sensibility of the gameplay absolutely comes first, and it really wants to make you feel like you're this badass main protagonist. I don't know how people generally rate it, but honestly, I think Doom Eternal was also a massive leg up over the original. Not the original, but like the 2016 one. And I love the 2016 one, but Doom Eternal just goes all in on that old school, have your power-ups, have a grenade shoulder, go shit crazy with the weapons. Like, it really, really does have that nostalgic video game vibe to it. And another one that's very recent is Marvel Rivals. That game oozes fun, oozes developer passion. I mean, I'm getting bored of hero shooters, and I have been for a while, but every now and then I will find myself booting up Marvel Rivals, and it is just very, very fucking fun. And to be fair, I don't think there's another way you can do a hero shooter. Like, Overwatch kind of perfected the formula, and Marvel Rivals stepped it up with just, characters that we absolutely adore from years of exposure to the Marvel property. I love Moon Knight. Moon Knight's in Marvel Rivals. Inject that into my veins. And obviously the big one for me right now is World of Warcraft. But that's mainly, it is built on the foundation of an older game. I mean, it is literally an older game. It came out in 2004. It's just still getting content because it's an MMO. And I do often find myself gravitating to the older stuff. I only started playing in 2021 with Shadowlands, right at the rear end of Shadowlands, but I find myself more interested in the TBC and Wrath of the Lich King content, generally speaking, for that game. And I'd be remiss, is that the term I'm looking for? I'd be remiss if I didn't mention indie games, because I think indie games, especially as of late, have really leaned into the nostalgia factor of like late 90s, early 2000s. FPS games, definitely, but you've got games like Little Kitty Big City that I played recently, that I think you classify as an indie game, that has this very PS2 platformer feel to it that I love. And to be fair, indie games have always represented a kind of harkening back to a bygone era, mainly because of the limitations of the technology that indie developers have access to. Well, not even the technology, but the funding and the time and the resources. Because a lot of really good indie games started off as like side-scrollers and, not simple platformers, but like they looked like something you'd play on an SNES. Not in a graphical way, because graphically they're generally like quite fucking good, but they had this older feel to it. And as technology has progressed and things have become more accessible and easier, indie games are now in that sort of early 3D PS1 N64 going into PS2 original Xbox era. That just speaks to me. That's my childhood. That's my nostalgia. So I'm over the moon with that. And honestly, with the exception of Doom, with the exception of racing games, I guess, and with the exception of World of Warcraft, indie games tend to be what I'm putting down the most hype for these days, because they just appeal to me. But anyway, that was my mindless, self-indulgent ramble for this week. I hope you're having a lovely day, evening, night, afternoon, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. And of course, I've got some questions. The first one being, do you miss old video games? Do you miss a certain era of old video games? Perhaps you prefer a bit later back than me. Perhaps you prefer that SNES N64 era. Perhaps you miss the late Xbox 360, PS3, early Xbox One, PS4 era. I don't know. I mean, I think there's something to be gained. There's something to be earned from every era of video games, and it just so happens that the one that I miss the most is the one that I grew up the most, which I think is true of a lot of people. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And another question is, do you think that the modern era of gaming is doing anything better? I mean, presumably graphics, but like certain games certainly bring new mechanics to the table that I think are a revelation compared to older games. There's a lot more accessibility, but there could be something else that I'm missing. So if you think that new games are doing better than the old bygone era that I'm missing, please let me know, because I'd love to really consider that, really check it out, and really understand some of the improvements that have been made to gaming over the years. As always, you can send those to WeSellPlantsManagement@gmail.com with the title Bone Idle Question, or you can leave them in the comments of the podcast platform of your choice. I've been Ryan. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.